What's up guys, and welcome back to another Wynand Crypto video. Tokenization has officially hit center stage, and here's the kicker. It's about to explode everywhere in just a matter of months. I'm talking about every major financial giant jumping on board. Governments worldwide are getting on board. Regulators are rolling out the red carpet for tokenization. All the major banking institutions have already secured their green lights. We're looking at nothing but upward momentum and mass adoption for tokenization. But here is what's really wild. Let's dive into what's actually been unfolding, because powerhouses like BlackRock are dropping some serious hints. And if you're not tuning in, you're completely missing the bigger narrative here. Let me break this down for you. First up, let's talk regulators, specifically the SEC. On May 12, the SEC hosted a roundtable discussion through their crypto task force. The topic? Tokenization, and get this, the participants included BlackRock, Fidelity, Nasdaq, and several others. Then later that month, they announced another conference scheduled for June 5th, titled Emerging Trends in Asset Management, with digital assets and tokenization featured prominently in the sessions. Once again, we saw panelists from BlackRock, Franklin Templeton, Fidelity, Nasdaq, and Robinhood participating. Can you see the massive picture forming here? If not, don't worry. BlackRock's about to spell it out for us. The reality is that everything is transitioning on-chain, and the biggest financial players aren't sitting on the sidelines. They're actively participating in this transformation. Check this out, we just received a major update. HSBC Hong Kong is advancing blockchain initiatives in custody, tokenization, and bond issuance. This is the same HSBC that formed a partnership with Metaco in 2023 and maintains connections with Ripple Custody. And guess what? Ripple Custody is facilitating tokenization on the XRP ledger too. Now I'm wondering, who exactly will HSBC turn to for custody, tokenization, and bond issuance? I can only speculate. They're projecting that RWA tokenization on public chains will experience massive growth within 2 to 5 years. It's like they're laying it all out for us. This major financial institution that's already deeply integrated with Ripple, while Ripple is simultaneously driving the XRP ledger tokenization movement. They're anticipating RWA tokenization on public chains to surge over the next 2 to 5 years. Makes you wonder what inside information they're working with. Then there's this. He discussed how Wall Street and virtually everything will migrate on-chain, and how tokenization unlocks possibilities beyond anything else in technology, even surpassing AI. He pointed out that the world's financial system operates through infrastructure built when trading floors relied on shouted orders and fax machines seemed cutting edge. So the question becomes, how do we revolutionize money movement? We tokenize it. That's precisely why stablecoins are receiving so much attention from these major players. Once you have stablecoins operating on-chain, you've got money on-chain, and after that milestone, bringing everything else on-chain becomes remarkably straightforward. The FX market can operate on-chain because you've got fiat representation. Suddenly, capital markets, stocks, everything can function on-chain. Also remember, this was March. By April, Larry Fink was discussing tokenization spanning from stocks to bonds, with real estate on the horizon, according to BlackRock CEO. Here's what Fink said about the challenge ahead. If they could address one obstacle right now, their challenge involves digital verification. Obviously, this represents a significant hurdle. He's essentially warning us about what's required while pushing this agenda forward. Naturally, many people have concerns about digital ID systems. I completely share those concerns. I believe digital ID is unnecessary for something like this, but they're going to push this heavily. On top of this development, we have BlackRock and BNY teaming up to tokenize shares of a $150 billion Treasury Trust Fund, as revealed in the SEC filings. This happened on May 1st. Notice the timeline here. March, April, May. Then, toward the end of May, everything starts aligning perfectly. Tokenization is experiencing its breakthrough moment. Tokenization is gaining genuine momentum as BlackRock, Libre, and Multibank execute billion-dollar strategies indicating the transition from concept to reality. This involves that $150 billion trust fund, the Treasury Trust Fund. Then came the major announcement. On the identical day, Libre revealed plans to tokenize $500 million in Telegram debt through their new Telegram bond fund. This fund will be accessible to accredited investors and usable as collateral for on-chain lending. The week's most significant headline originated from Dubai, where Multibank Group executed a $3 billion RWA tokenization agreement with UAE-based real estate company MEG and blockchain infrastructure provider Maverick. When you consider what's happening here, these kind of moves are becoming so routine, they barely register as major news because of how commonplace they're becoming. But remember, this momentum is being driven by the most influential names in finance. Speaking of Dubai, on June 8th, Dubai real estate sales reached $18 billion in May during their tokenization initiative. Fascinating timing. You know, like when Dubai Land Department launched the pilot phase of real estate tokenization projects on the XRP ledger? When we examine this, DLD expects that this revolutionary initiative will generate substantial growth in the real estate tokenization sector, with market value projected to hit $60 billion by 2033, representing 7% of Dubai's total real estate transactions. And this is happening on the XRP ledger. Here is the official announcement from Ripple. At over $600 trillion, real estate stands as one of the world's most valuable asset classes, and now it's moving on-chain. The growth continues accelerating. By the way, today the XRP ledger keeps expanding in RWA value, up 35% over the past 30 days. 157 million is just the beginning. Stablecoin market cap has also increased over 31% in the last 30 days. We can observe all this growth happening. You can actually track what's been expanding over the past month. Stocks are also experiencing significant growth. ROUSD is up approximately 36.5% over the past 7 days. Ondo with USG increased 1.9 million from essentially zero. We also have non-US government debt up about 1.25%, nothing too dramatic here. Then there are additional T-bills and US treasuries, but when we analyze what's occurring, we're witnessing some substantial step function developments around tokenization on the XRP ledger, and we're just beginning. This real estate tokenization represents merely a pilot phase, imagining when this goes fully operational. But let's discuss what BlackRock has been communicating to us. Listen to what BlackRock COO says about the next decade. Listen to this.
What advice would you give to, sort of the rest of the financial universe that are thinking about getting into this space now?
It's a great question. I think from our lens, it's a very, what I'm going to say is going to be very simple. Executing it is extremely hard. So I recognize that. But to us, it's very basic. You basically have a new set of exposures. Mm-hmm. The real utility in Unlock is to be able to put them in the whole portfolio. And interestingly enough, I think you could turn the telescope around also and say, ultimately, how do you put these capital markets exposures in digital wallets? And how do you go? So if you think about the bridge strategy of this alternate digital asset universe and bringing it to the capital markets, I think it's naive to assume, and this doesn't have to be in a month, but if you look out over time, it's naive to assume that you don't also have to think through how do you bring the traditional capital markets to this alternative universe. And I think both connection points will define the next decade.
I couldn't agree more. And the best example of it, by the way, was the ETFs. So we got all thrown a curveball in the last minute. There were no in-kind creates. And so we were forced to try and figure out how to make old world meet new world, right? And so hopefully in the next version thereof, we're going to have more of a synthesis of those two things. So yeah, you're spot on. I agree with that. So
I couldn't agree more. The perfect example was the ETFs. We all got surprised at the last moment. In-kind creates weren't available, forcing us to figure out how to merge old world with new world. Hopefully, in the next iteration, we'll achieve better synthesis of both elements. Additionally, big recognition to subjective views. Robert Michnick, Managing Director of Head of Digital Assets at BlackRock. Watch this insight.
And taking things further in the tokenization direction, what would you say is the main economic drivers for tokenization for BlackRock?
Well, I think that for us, it's a story primarily of access and cost for our clients. It's about being able to make more investments accessible to a larger number of investors and to do so at a lower cost. And there's a bunch of reasons that cost efficiency can come about. I think one of the features, obviously, that you get with tokenization, in addition to those two, is the potential for liquidity. To date, we haven't seen that liquidity come to life in a real way, and we can maybe talk about that a bit later on in terms of why that is and how we solve it.
Yeah, well, I guess that's the big thing here. We've got all these catalyst projects downstairs. We've got, obviously, everybody in the room agrees there's a lot going on in the tokenization space, but what do you think would really need to happen for an exponential kicker here, for the whole thing to take off? What needs to come together?
Yeah, I think that you could sort of boil it down to three primary things. In our view, we used to say four, but actually we think that one of the four has kind of been checked off, which is good. One is the widespread availability of custody for tokenized assets in an institutional grade way. So this space needs a number of institutional custodians, ideally both crypto native and those from the traditional space, to make it seamless to be able to participate in tokenized assets, right? Because a lot of institutions are not going to bring on necessarily a new custodian for that, first tokenized asset that they're interested in. There's just a lot of friction and overhead to implement that. So once it's fairly ubiquitous, then it becomes a lot easier. The second is exchange liquidity, right? So there's a bunch of, obviously, projects trying to solve for this, but we haven't yet seen a large incumbent, that's what I think would be valuable for a large incumbent, if there were a tokenized asset trading venue launched on the back of one of those platforms, that would potentially be a real step change in terms of how realizable that liquidity value prop is. And then third, the regulatory clarity, which I think has been talked about a lot, and there's certainly progress on that front. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it comes down to, can we get comfort that a tokenized bond is going to be effectively a bond, tokenized fund, whether that's private, ETF, et cetera, is going to be treated as a private fund, ETF, et cetera. And I think that's coming. The fourth piece, which actually there's been pretty good coalescence around lately, the space, in our view, was a little bit too fragmented to get real adoption in terms of, there's so many asset classes people were excited about, and there were 15 different things people were trying to tokenize at once, and that was counterproductive to actually coalescing around one or two or three things where we'd be able to say, here's an asset class, here's a geography where we used to do it on traditional finance rails, and now we do it in all or in majority in a tokenized way. And now there's started to be a little bit more focus there, which is helpful.
Did you notice what he's wearing around his neck? It's a Ripple lanyard. Secondly, what he's describing here is institutional grade custody. You have Ripple custody available, exchange liquidity. You can access XRP among the most liquid assets in the space. ROUSD also offers full liquidity, completely compliant and regulated. Ripple's about to receive SEC approval, as is XRP completely. So you have an institutional-grade custody platform available that provides liquidity and everything any major bank, asset management company, or institution requires. Plus, you get regulatory clarity alongside it. Ripple has built not just tokenization infrastructure, but next-generation infrastructure to power anything in the digital and DLT blockchain world. This is why I focus on current developments. This is why I believe everyone should pay attention when BlackRock speaks and tells us what's coming. And you guys, I have a special trick for you which nobody seems to be using, and I cannot wrap my head around why. Because if you sign up through my link down in the description onto the BTCC exchange, you get a 10% deposit bonus, and now stay with me here. Now here comes the important part. If you have any trading capital on any other exchange and you move it to your newly created BTCC account, you get, on top of your capital, you moved another 10% extra trading capital. As an example, so if you move or deposit $50,000 to your account, you get $5,000 for free. I'm not kidding. I really don't understand why nobody's doing this. To me, it really seems like people sometimes are too lazy or just don't like free money. I cannot make that account for you. Now please pause the video for a minute to make an account. You can thank me later in the comments below, because this limited time promotion is by far the easiest way to increase your trading capital. Now let's jump back into the video. Chainlink recently discussed how every stock, every bond, every fund, every asset can be tokenized. This references Larry Fink's annual letter. Look at our current position. I want you to examine this image. We're positioned here at $200+ billion. Actually, we're not even at $200+ billion. The total tokenized value, I'm talking about the complete value on-chain, not just individual networks, everything. This includes protocols, private networks, $24 billion. We haven't even reached a point where we fill one complete square on this chart. The total untokenized value, $1.64 quadrillion. We're just beginning here. I want you to understand that players like BlackRock are enabling this transformation. They're accelerating this movement. They're driving this forward. Networks like XRP and the XRPL will be utilized because they're already being accelerated and integrated on multiple occasions. What's remarkable is even examining the networks. The XRP ledger is climbing the rankings significantly. Over the last 30 days, it's up 35%. Some other networks barely show double-digit growth. Actually, almost all of them barely reach double digits except for, say, Plume. Plume increased 141%. XDC was actually down 0.6% over the past 30 days. Outside of Plume, Sui, and Noble, there are 3 other players here. 4 in the top 26 being tracked here achieve double-digit growth, and XRP rivals all of them with almost 35% growth. Specific networks are being selected. They're becoming the winners. They're becoming the major players that big banks, institutional players, and asset management companies will utilize and connect to. I want you to realize we have tremendous distance to cover here. We're not just getting started. That's why tokenization will only trend upward moving forward. Smash the like button if you're ready to ride the tokenization wave. Subscribe to stay ahead of the curve, because this revolution is just getting started, and turn on notification so you don't miss a single update as we witness the biggest financial transformation in history unfold before our eyes. Drop a comment below with your thoughts on which network will dominate the tokenization space. Thank you very much for watching. Wynand Crypto out.